Hey, Natalie.
Hi, Raph. Happy Valentine's Day. It is for me. Sorry, I think it's the next day for you.
Yeah, sorry you're a day late. Maybe
You're in the future.
much as I hoped. No, thanks. Yeah, happy Valentine's Day to you as well. Great to be here with you. We are going to talk about how to land a job where you get to teach how you want to teach. So can you set this up for us? Why are we having this conversation?
We're having this conversation because a situation came up where someone was concerned that she is learning Pilates in a way that is really different than what do I want to say, the usual way that Pilates is understood and taught. And by that, I mean things like neutral spine, cueing breath, a lot of the alignment cues. That's really, really popular, right? That's what Pilates is. It's in the United States, maybe in Australia and other places as well. There's still a lot of talk about safety and alignment and breath and the Pilates principles, all of those things. And she's not being taught in that way.
Is she being taught by some kind of rogue organization?
Yeah, I'm not going to name names, but it has to do with inhaling.
Okay, and so this student had a fair enough concern that in the program that she's studying, she's being taught current science-based best practice, things like external cues. We don't talk about cueing breathing a lot, not emphasizing alignment protocols and neutral spine, all of those things. And that she sees the value in all those things, but she's concerned that when she, walks out of her home and, walks a few blocks down the street to the local Pilates studio and asks for a job, the first thing they're going to do is say, okay, show us how you cue breath, alignment, neutral spine, and transversus abdominis. And she's going to be like unable to do that because we haven't taught her to do those things, because those things don't actually add value to clients. So, how will she get a job when she's not like the other kids?
Yeah, I think it's a really fair question. It was a brave question to ask. I found Breathe after I already got a job, but there were times when I met with other Pilates studio owners who did ask me, well, tell me your thoughts about the transverse abdominis and tell me your thoughts about pelvic floor and those sorts of things. So it is really common. And I feel like if you are going to a very typical Pilates studio, those are really common pieces of conversation that come up. Those are common interview questions. They want to know that you know your shit so that you're a good Pilates teacher and that you're going to keep the client safe and happy.
All right. So and I think the reason we're having this conversation on Pilates Elephants rather than just writing a reply to that student in Slack, which we could have done, is that we both agreed that this would be a valuable conversation for a broader community of people who maybe already have a job or maybe are, looking for a job, either one, but are wondering like, okay, well, I've been listening to Pilates Elephants, I've been doing some reading and research, and I've learned about these new kind of more evidence-based approaches to teaching movement, and I want to incorporate those into the way that I teach, or maybe I already am incorporating them into the way that I teach. And I'm starting to feel like a square peg in a round hole, and I'm starting to feel like I'm not like the other kids. Like when I was a kid, this was in the 70s, my mum sent me to school with her homemade wholemeal bread, which kind of looked like an explosion in a bread tin, and
it was probably so good for you too, and it was homemade.
So good for me. It was so.
But
good
you
for me.
wanted the sliced white stuff, I bet.
I wanted the white bread with the crusts cut off, like all of the other kids had. And unfortunately, I had super thick, crumbly wholemeal bread with alfalfa and all kinds of weird, hippie vegetables in there.
That you probably eat now and love.
Which I absolutely am totally grateful now for now and very glad that my mum did that. But at the time I was mortified, and I remember begging her on many occasions to just please give me just normal food to take to school. But she didn't. And now I'm really grateful, you know. So anyway, I think so I guess that is the reason we're having this conversation on air, because I had wholemeal bread as a kid. No, it's because I think we both agree that there's probably a much wider group of people out there who are listeners to this podcast who feel like, I don't quite feel like I fit in, and I feel like I might even struggle to get a job, or where I'm working, I kind of have to, be like extra diplomatic, or maybe kind of hide my light under a bushel a little bit, to pretend that I kind of fit in. So if that's you.
Yeah, this episode is for you. This is definitely not to put a spotlight on this particular student, because it is, I think, it's an issue that impacts a lot of people in different ways. So if we can help you fly your freak flag loudly and proudly, then I'm happy to take a crack at it.
Great. Let's get you proudly eating your wholemeal alfalfa sandwiches.
There you go.
All right. So let's think of a few different scenarios, but let's start with the idea of, okay, we want to get a job. Okay. So whether it's your first job or your 99th job, doesn't matter, but you're looking for a job in a studio, and they've advertised, and you go along and you're sitting down for some type of interview, whether you've had an audition or whatever it is. Basically, there's some conversation that happens at some point in the interview, and the studio owner asks you questions about your teaching philosophy, your teaching approach, and those questions are run along the lines of, are you skilled at doing this list of things that are not evidence-based? Cueing transversus abdominis, helping clients maintain their pelvic stability, etc. And so, what do you do if, let's set up two scenarios here. A, maybe you know how to do those things because you've been teaching for a while, but you've kind of come to a position where you don't feel comfortable doing those things anymore because you realize they don't constitute high value care for your clients. Or maybe you actually don't know how to do those things because you've recently been trained by us, or if there is another provider on the planet who's doing evidence-based training, and you've learned actually how to do high-value care, which doesn't include cueing transversus abdominis and pelvic stability, etc. So either you know how to do those things, but you kind of don't feel comfortable doing it, or you actually don't know how to do those things. But either way, the prospective employer sits you down and goes, great, I think you'd be a wonderful fit for this workplace. Just the final question before we, offer you the job, how would you go about cueing transversus abdominis, for a client with low back pain? What do you say?
Oh, that was a lot. Can I put us in a time machine and put your question in parentheses?
Yeah, where are we going back to?
We're going to go back to before you sit down with the studio owner for the interview. And what I would like to offer up first is to say that hopefully you have a relationship with the studio owner. And that might be that you are a member of that studio having taken classes, right? Because, if you are a member of that studio, they know who you are, they know what you like, you know them and how they do things. So being able to have that frame of reference is going to put you in such a better position to have any kind of interview with the studio owner or the hiring manager, because you're already there. You're already a member. And, I think the thing is, especially if you're training at a company like Breathe, where we're not doing things in a traditional way, it is actually, I think, quite important to be able to do that kind of homework ahead of time. So if at all possible, take some classes or be a member. So that way, you know what you're getting yourself into, and the hiring people will know who you are as well. I was listening to a podcast about marketing yourself the other day, and I wrote it down. It says, the person said, make it easier for them to find you than your competitor. And I think that was such a powerful phrase, right? Because that's true for anything that you do in any kind of business. Make it easier for them to find you. Like, what better way than to be a customer? So that way, when you sit down in your interview and the hiring manager says, oh, yeah, let's have a talk about transverse abdominis, core activation, and all those things, you have a relationship, you have hopefully a trusting relationship with this person to be able to say, I would love to give you my thoughts about that. Would it be okay if we talk about this? And that way, it's still an interview as opposed to you as a potential employee trying to school your potential boss.
Right. Okay. I love the time machine. And, if we take out sort of, going back to Austria in the 1930s and killing Hitler, or, living your life over again, making up for the things that you would have done differently. If our time machine is very limited and can only take us back to, a few weeks before we applied for this job, I 100% agree that just patronising the studio, I think it's a must. Pretty much every studio owner I've ever talked to, when I ask them, like, what are the top 5 things you look for in a potential new hire? Like, the number one thing is, like, they're a client. Is like that's top of the list for almost everyone. And the reason for that is because they can see, by showing up at the sessions regularly, that studio owner can see that you are inherently a values fit. If you've already put your money where your mouth is and paid to come and do sessions at the studio, it's like, well, you've already basically shown that you are a values fit for that studio. It's like, so you've already done, like, you're already ahead of 90% of the other candidates just by doing that, just by being physically present in the studio.
You're a stakeholder. You're a stakeholder in the company. Yeah.
Right. And I think what you say there about, people feeling they know you, I think is so crucial. There's a wonderful story about a guy called Daryl Davis, who's a black man in the southern US who has converted over 200 Ku Klux Klan people to leave the Ku Klux Klan by simply sitting down with them and talking with them. There's many videos. You can find him online on YouTube, on Google, whatever. But basically, his approach is very, very simple. It's like, when we each recognize our common humanity, it's very hard to hate someone. When you see somebody as a 3-dimensional human being, with fears and hopes and dreams and, all of the rest of it, it's very hard to hate that person. And so his only strategy is to just sit down and get to know people and exchange genuine, conversation with them about what's important and what they love, what they're concerned about in the world, etc. And after a while, they realize, like, gee, I don't hate this guy. He's, this is a nice guy. and they can't reconcile that with the fact that, they hate all black people and all black people are terrible. And so they have this kind of realization, a lot of them, that's like, oh, maybe all black people aren't terrible. Like, maybe I've been wrong about this whole thing the whole time. And, so 200, people he's succeeded with. And so I think that the application of that to our scenario here is, well, if we have a studio owner who's potentially going to judge you on criteria that aren't really the best criteria to decide on whether you're a good fit for that workplace or not, they're much less likely to do so if they see you as a 3-dimensional human and they feel a human connection with you beforehand. Like, Natalie, like, I'm sure that if you and I really tried to, we could sit down and make a list of all the things about each other that would irritate each other potentially. Like, maybe, I don't know, maybe if, you squeeze a toothpaste tube from the top, I don't know, but if
my husband was here, he could help you with that.
Okay. But I mean, if we tried to look for the things that would irritate each other, I'm sure we could find some. Okay, but if we instead tried to find the things that we respect and love about each other, then I'm sure we could find those things too. And, one would lead to much more, successful relationship than the other. And so I think, what you say there is, it's very basic, pragmatic advice. Go do classes at the studio before you apply for the job. But it's so profoundly valuable on so many levels that just of connecting with based around common humanity. And then once you already have some kind of relationship with that person, the interview is going to go so much better, so much better.
I totally agree. And I love that you brought up, was it Daryl Davis? That's his name?
Yeah, Daryl Davis.
Yeah, I think it was you who told me a long time ago about him. And I did listen to him on a podcast, and he's just absolutely amazing. And it is such a huge and powerful lesson that a lot of times people are just afraid of what they don't know. So in this, in our situation where we're teaching, we're essentially, I guess, arguably forcibly changing the paradigm. We're doing something really different in a community and in a tradition that is so fiercely protective of lineage and this is how we do things. And here we are, like, who the hell are we to tell you, no, we're not going to do it that way? And that, I see that on social media. I've witnessed that. I've been a part of that in person to person conversations. And a lot of it really is just people are afraid of what they don't know. So if you are doing something different, it really just makes a lot of sense to establish trust with whoever it is that is going to be hiring you, so that you can have those conversations, and they're going to be so much more willing to listen and hear you. I mean, and honestly, they may not even necessarily agree, but they'll listen. Because I think that's part of the fear, right? Is just like, if I show up cold and I just go to a studio and I'm like, hey, this is me. I have these trainings and I most recently trained with Breathe, and you're just down the road from me and I thought I would work with you, and oh yeah, no, I'm not going to cue breath, and sorry, don't teach neutral, and no, I'm not going to talk about muscles. I mean, they're going to be like, there's the door. Don't let it hit your ass on the way out. Right. So yeah, find a way to get to know the hiring people, take classes.
Yeah. And I think there's also a little, just I'd like to add to before we move on to the next point, a point around we don't even need to necessarily, in all circumstances, explore those potential areas of disagreement. I think in some situations it is important, but I think a lot of times we don't need to. Like, for example, on this podcast, I've had a lot of people guest on the podcast who I find personally to be inspiring, exciting. They're doing exciting things in the Pilates world, whether that's from a business perspective, from a client perspective, just innovating generally. I've had a lot of people on this podcast, and most people who have been on the podcast have said something at one point in the conversation that I disagree with. So maybe I was talking with somebody about their amazing business that they've built, all right? And at one point they go, oh yeah, and blah, 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 when I Q transversus abdominis, blah, 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 right? And I just let that slide past, because the purpose of the conversation is not for me to harangue them about why they're wrong, about doing that particular thing. It's to talk about their innovative business that they've built and how that conversation can add value to the community who listens to this podcast. So I think if we're to form a community solely based on everybody being in 100% lockstep and agreeing on every single possible thing, it's going to be a really freaking small community.
It sure will insular. Be. Yeah.
So we better be cool with people having different views as long as we hold shared values, and I think the values that we share, I know you and I do, and I imagine most of the listeners to this podcast share as well, are around, doing a great job and helping our clients in the best possible way, and, in a way that is sustainable and helps us as humans, and Pilates instructors grow and thrive, not at the expense of our health and well-being, but, in service of our health and well-being. And, you know, I think that's a pretty, those are values I imagine most people would agree with, who listen to this podcast. And I think, like, well, if you're out there listening to this and if at any point you've ever said or thought anything that I would disagree with, like, well, that's cool. You know, I still love you. We can still be friends. We can still be part of a community together. And you might even, you know, maybe we could even work together. You know, like, I think you don't have to have 100% overlap in all of your beliefs in order to work successfully with, you know, I mean, gee, I wouldn't want to have 28 identical clones of myself, you know, running a business. That would be like, you know, being John Malkovich.
Well, I mean, case in point, like, I work for Breathe, and Breathe is an online company working with a lot of tech. And really all I want is a TV with knobs, but we can live together. It's fine. I can make it work. Yeah. Well, and I think you're right too. You know, like, I think what's funny to me whenever I see arguments in the Pilates world about us versus them and you're right and I'm wrong, it's really funny because I feel like we have so much more in common and our mission is actually the same. Then we have differences. Like, can we just focus on that? Like, we have so much more in common. Like, there's no need to quibble over, you know, some things. Like,
I know, it's so weird, isn't it? Because somebody who's outside the Pilates scene would be completely mystified and wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Just like, I guess, if you drive past a field and there's 100 cattle in the field, okay, probably most of them, you probably wouldn't be able to tell them apart. You know, like, if you lined up 10 of them and then mixed them up in a different orders, like, could you tell which one was which? Yeah, most of us couldn't, you know. Yet I'm sure to the cattle, there are vast differences between one and the other, and they would never mix each other up, you know. But to us, it's like, yeah, you've seen one cow, you've seen them all. They're all basically the same, you know, I guess, to most humans. And I think to most people who don't really care about Pilates, it's like, you know, the difference between the sort of Pilates that emphasizes neutral spine and the sort of Pilates that doesn't, they'll be like between two identical cows. It's like, you know, what? There's no difference. Like, corporate wants you to find the difference between these two pictures. You know, they're the same picture, that meme, you know. And yet we get so passionate about these, you know, microscopic differences that to most people it would be completely invisible.
Oh, I think I was just going to say, to the average human being who doesn't really know about Pilates, I know for a fact, because I've been to parties where, like, why is there so much drama? I don't understand the drama. Like, it's just, isn't it just crunching? Like, isn't it just ab curls? It's like, yeah, it is.
It is. And imagine you went to a party and you're talking to a couple of engineers and they were in a passionately heated debate about, you know, this particular brand of tools versus this other particular brand of tools, you know, and they ended up like almost coming to fisticuffs over it and, you know, swearing vilely at the other person. And you'd be just like, I just don't get why it matters. All right. So I think there's, broadly speaking, you know, we can sum up that last conversational phase as like, we don't have to agree 100%. And if we can seek out the common humanity, the common values, the common ideals, you know, seek shared, you know, things that we share rather than highlighting things that we disagree on, that can be enough, and we don't even have to resolve it at all. It's like, I don't care if you don't like pineapple on pizza, we can still be friends, you know.
I do not like pineapple in pizza, and I am still your friend.
Right, there you go. That proves it. So, and yet there are times when it does matter. And so, for instance, you know, if you know, there would be certain values that if we differed on them, that could be a deal breaker for either or both of us, right? So I don't know I can't even think of what it might be, but I don't know, if you didn't think Pilates was good or something, I don't know. Like,
yeah, that would be a problem.
I would still respect you, but I'm not sure how
I wouldn't. You wouldn't have hired me if I hated
So
Pilates.
that would be a deal breaker, right? If you came for your job interview and we're like, okay, tell us what you love about Pilates, and you're like, to be honest, I don't really like it. Like it'll be like, okay, I think that's going to be a problem. So there are some things that could be a deal breaker, even though it wouldn't necessarily diminish my respect for you. It would just be like, okay, I don't think this is a good fit, you know. And I'm sure there would be things from your end that would be likewise. If you were like, okay, tell me about how you respect the people who work in the workplace, and we'd be like, oh no, we prefer to think of them as, mindless slaves who just do our bidding. You know, you'll be like, I'm not sure if this is going to be a good fit. When another benefit of when you're going along to that studio and being a participant in their sessions is you get a feel for how they teach and how they interact with their clients and how they interact with the staff and what the vibe is. And you'll get a feel for like, okay, is this somewhere I actually want to work?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like you got to pick your battles, right? Like, I think that's one thing maybe when you're, if I can go back to my baby Pilates teacher self, like I would have a conversation about like what's important to you and pick your battles. I think you may have mentioned this. I don't even remember where you mentioned this, but it's, like, let's just say breath. Let's use breath as, the thing. It doesn't hurt anybody, right, to cue breath. It doesn't, it's just at the end of the day, we can go back and forth about why we do or do not cue breath. But if that's a really important concept at the studio and we didn't cue breath, or we told you it's, it's not helpful, you don't have to do it, that might be a point of, that might be an inflection point where you decide whether or not if that's going to be the deal breaker for you. But I would say for me, it's not like, okay, I can cue breath. At some point, maybe building a relationship with the studio owner and saying, can we please have a discussion and maybe talk about why, why this is, but like in the beginning, if you're a new team member, I'm stumbling on my words, but I guess what I'm saying is like, pick your battles and almost like when you're exercising and you have little pains here and there, like what can you tolerate? Like just what can you tolerate? Like you're not going to win everything, right? Like you're never going to find a perfect job. I was talking with my husband about this. Like there's never a perfect job. So what is it that you're willing to accept as like this, just a little bit of shit that goes along with everything else that's really great?
Yeah. And it's, so maybe, if you choose to cue breath in your classes because that's a minor sacrifice, it's not really hurting anyone. It's like, okay, slight eye roll, but it's like, yeah, who cares? Doesn't matter. I mean, we all do those. All of us who have, managed to stay married over the years, do those kinds of things all the time. I know my wife likes the milk put in a very particular place in the fridge, there are just certain things that you do and you kind of roll your eyes and laugh, at the same time. But then you actually often when you think back, it's like, oh, those are kind of cute, those little crazy idiosyncrasies that people have that they want things done a certain way. But you go along even though you think it's a bunch of nonsense, because you like and respect that person. It doesn't really hurt you to do it.
Well, and I will say, I was never in a position where I had to look for a job after my Breathe certification. I already had a job. So for me, the issue was a little bit different. It was about, okay, I was trained this way and I don't want to teach like that anymore. And I have these new skill sets, but how am I going to incorporate them in a way that's friendly and safe, both for the client and for myself, in a studio that has traditionally, for 20 years has taught in a specific way. So neutral spine. So, for me, it was like, I think I had the trust of my supervisors and my clients to be able to start incorporating some of the things that I wanted to change. Like there was a point where I started to let go of breath, and I started to let go of saying things like set your core, right? Like those are two little things that I started to just organically get rid of. And then over time, just kind of ratcheting it up. So I know this is not necessarily relevant to getting a job, but if you're in a job and you want to fly your freak flag, like trying to find small ways to do that. But it goes back to the whole idea of having that relationship, that trusting relationship already with both your clients and with your boss, so that if and when the hard conversation comes up as to why I'm not doing it this way, it's a less jagged pill to swallow for the person to be able to say, I don't find it to be really helpful. Like it was the same thing with pelvic floor. A lot of times we would cue pelvic floor, and then I finally said, I can't do that. Like I can't do that anymore. I don't think I'm not, I'm out of my lane here. Like I can't do that. And it was a good conversation to have.
I think when evaluating that potential relationship beforehand, I just want to go back to that sort of patronizing the studio, because I really think pretty much everything we're talking about today hinges on you going and having an experience and showing your face and yourself in that studio a bunch of times, not just once or twice, but like really get a feel for it before you apply for or accept a job somewhere. And part of it is getting a sense of like, well, do you actually want to work in this environment? And it's like, well, there may be some things that they do differently to the way that you've been trained. I mean, that basically is going to be the case for anyone, regardless of where they trained. I mean, if you're trained by Balanced Body and you go and work in a studio, owned by someone trained by Bassi or Polestars, like there are going to be differences, So, assuming that we can just comfortably live with those differences, but there may be certain values that you might not be comfortable, living with if they conflict, And so if you got a sense that that person or that studio owner or the culture at the studio held values that were incompatible with values that you hold, that are really important to you, and you feel like are kind of fundamental to how you want to teach Pilates. I'm not talking about specific techniques. I'm talking about, a philosophical approach of, maybe there's somewhere that, you go along and they're very fear-based in the way that they cue, and maybe they're very rigid and sort of didactic in the way that they, tell clients what to do all the time. And the instructor is this great big expert telling everyone exactly what they should do. And there is no autonomy given to the client. And, I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. Like, I think there's definitely a time and a place for being directive with people and, stuff. But if, for example, you got that rubbed your fur up the wrong way, you just got a feeling like, this is not my vibe, it's like, well, I would say don't work there. That's not a good fit. I mean, I don't know why. I've been married for 25 years and I'm very, very happily married, and I've got absolutely no, desire to stray in any way. But I follow this woman on social media. She's a single men's dating coach. I just find the psychology fascinating. And so she just gives these little tips about if you're a single guy, how to approach girls or how to, deal with the dating scene or whatever. And one thing that she sort of repeatedly emphasizes is she does a lot of ask me anything little, stories. And so people ask like, oh, I've texted this girl 4 times and she hasn't responded, right? What do I do? Right. And her response, the coach's response is like, move on. That's what you do, right?
I was going to say, leave her alone.
Right.
I can say that for free. Leave her alone.
Right. So, and there are 101 variations on that question. Oh, she says she's keen, but she's non-committal as to setting a specific time. What do I do? Move on. Like, so it's like the basic advice is don't try and force a square peg into a round hole there. Right? If it's not a great fit, it's not a great fit. That's cool. Move on.
I guess maybe one way that I would say that is maybe don't teach at a place you wouldn't want to take.
Yeah. You said it in like 5 words, what I took like 5 minutes to say. Well done.
That's okay. That's okay. I appreciate hearing about the dating coach.
Yeah, it's called, she's called Dating by Blaine, Blaine. Yeah. I'm sure you won't have anything to learn from her, but I think I find her entertaining. All right. So do you really want to work for that person? And it's okay if you don't, like as a potential employee, like I think it's important to conceptualize the interview process not as like you applying and the studio owner deciding whether you get to work there or not. It's like dating, right? You both have to swipe right in order for it to be a match, right?
Yeah. I think that's a really important point. It is definitely a collaboration and you have something to offer, which is, I think, a really nice segue into the second point that we have, which is the studio owners have a problem. So you have some leverage.
You have a lot of leverage. You have more leverage than they have because we're actually in a market where instructors are in short supply, in high demand. So it's very likely the case that that studio owner is struggling to find enough instructors and doesn't have enough good quality applicants and is probably teaching more sessions per week than they want to because they can't get anyone else in to cover those sessions. And so they're probably like feeling burnt out and fairly desperate to get somebody ASAP because their significant other has probably been nagging them because they're never at home. Their kids are going, Mommy, why don't I ever see you anymore? And they're sick of doing their accounting for their studio on the kitchen table at midnight when they get home after 14 hours of teaching, and they want their life back.
I can't speak to the whole of the industry, but I can say with some familiarity in the Seattle area that we definitely have a Pilates instructor shortage. I know that for the last at least 2 years, people are cold calling me asking if I want to work without even an interview. They just want essentially a warm body. And Raph, you can speak better to it than I can, but there is, the issue with a studio that doesn't have enough instructors, like that's a huge issue for a studio for so many reasons, right? Like you can't get covers. You end up canceling classes. You can't offer enough classes. So you've got members who are upset because they can't book into a class that they want. And they don't have enough times that work for their schedule. And so either you're going to have a member that's sticking around that's pissed off and not getting what they want for their money, or you're going to have members who get pissed off so much that they leave. So yeah, studio owners have a problem. So yeah, you as the potential instructor has so much power.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think the thinking back to when I was a studio owner or a beginner studio owner, certainly the first few years, and I used to ask questions of people in interviews like, "Oh, show me your resume, show me your qualifications. Let's ask you some, quote Pilates theory, unquote questions. Show me how you do a posture assessment. Come in and teach a class." So I would have all of these questions and criteria that I would ask people that nowadays I would never ask in an interview. In fact, we just hired two team members, very highly paid team members, actually. We didn't look at a single resume. Like we just don't even look at resumes anymore. It's like it's all interview-based and skills assessments. Like, can you do the job we're hiring you to do? That's the most important question. And the second most important question is, are you somebody I want to work with? And so I think, as a relatively naive and new business owner 15 years ago, I would have asked those kinds of technical questions in an interview, and I would have wanted to see people's resumes and ask what their lineage was and all the rest of it. But now, and for some years now, I've realized that actually what's important, seeing someone's resume, I've hired people with amazing resumes who've been a terrible fit and not done the job very well at all, and so I've realized that, your theoretical understanding and your political, correctness to whatever lineage of Pilates I'm affiliated with really doesn't have much, if any, correlation with how good of a team member you're going to be and how well you're going to service the clients and how easy you are going to be to work with, and so some of the best people I've worked with, have taught Pilates in a very different way than I teach Pilates, but their classes have been consistently full. They show up on time every time. They basically never took a sick day, never called in, late or anything, always said yes to subs. And it's like, that's my dream employee. That's my dream employee. And it's like, I don't care what resume you have or what cues you use. Like, if the clients love it enough to keep coming back with their friends, it's like, great, do more of that, And so I think that as studio owners, we like, studio owners don't receive any formal training in how to conduct, hiring interviews, right? You just make it up as you go along, or you basically do what you've experienced as an employee. You just basically repeat that process, or maybe you look up a YouTube video if you're really enterprising and on how to hire something. But basically, people don't have any great skill or knowledge in how to do this. So they kind of default to what they know, and we all do it. And so what they know is the technical aspects of Pilates because that's what they're trained in. But actually those things don't predict success in the job at all. If you ask the studio owner, describe to me, what your perfect outcome would be from hiring this person, they will say full classes, fun to work with, and no trouble. I don't know dramas with other employees, no calling in late, no changing schedules at the last minute, just like easy to work with and full classes. That's what I want. That's what I want for Christmas. So I think we have this, a lot of times in the hiring process, the conversation defaults to technical aspects around Pilates instruction or your resume or your lineage or whatever, where actually what both people really want to know is like, is this going to be a good fit? Are we going to enjoy working together? And is this person actually going to produce the result I need them to produce, which is, full sessions and delighted clients, So, so how can you, as the potential employee, shift the conversation away from, tell me about X, Y, Z technical aspects of how you teach, and to those, topics that are of actually more important interest to both parties, which is like, okay, do we actually want to work together? Like, we're going to spend a lot of time together if we work together. Is this going to be fun for both of us and easy for both of us? And secondly, it's like, okay, you're hiring me to produce a result, which is full classes and delighted clients. How can we both be confident that I'm going to deliver that for you?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Well, and I think that, just talking about this, like, it's such an exciting opportunity for our students, for anybody, but really our students, to be able to really show studio owners what sets them apart. Like, it makes me excited for our students and for anybody who's doing things differently, that they really believe in their heart is for the benefit of of our clients that, show them what you got. Like, and in terms of our particular students, like there are so many things that they do really well. Like that to me is where the homework comes in when you're going to apply for a job, is please go in prepared, knowing what makes you shine, like the things that you're really, really good at. So if we're talking about, let's say internal versus external cueing, if that comes up in your audition, like it's exciting to me to be able to show that to a studio owner. Like, look at this awesome thing that I can do, which seems really weird, but especially if there are new students in the class, like being able to teach an exercise and get your students to do things because you're not cueing muscles. It's just exciting. It's exciting to me to have that our students get that opportunity to really show people, give people a taste of what they can do really well, which is to have the ability to teach anybody, right? Like you can teach anybody with the strategies that we have, because we've got science on our side. So being able to provide a rewarding learning experience for anybody who comes to our class, and to be able to break exercises down into meaningful parts so that everybody's doing something. Like those are really exciting things to me that I didn't know when I was a baby Pilates teacher, and just worried out of my mind about, am I going to remember my program? Am I going to remember those exercises? Like, I feel like that's if you can convince somebody to give you an audition, like you're golden, because you can show them your stuff. You can show them what sets you apart. Know what sets you apart. Like, be ready to talk about why you do the things you do and why it matters.
And ultimately, I think, what sets you apart is that you teach really well, like you say, like basically, and when I say teach really well, I mean give people an experience in that session that they go, wow, that was awesome fun. That was great. That was amazing. And there's a fantastic example of this. I think I've mentioned this before on the show, but it was so long ago, that Lizzie, our President Student Success Manager at Breathe Education, few years ago now, auditioned at a Pilates studio here in Melbourne, and she went along and sat in the audition. Like there was a few instructors auditioning, and the owner came out and said, okay, at this studio, we always cue core activation. And one of the criteria of passing this audition and working here is you must cue core activation. I can't remember the exact number of times. It was like 9 times, at least in the session, right? So that was one of the criteria that the employer had put for if you want to pass this audition, you have to say the word core at least 9 times. I can't remember the number of times, but some number. And Lizzie was thinking like, well, I'm not comfortable doing that, right? I've studied with Breathe, and I don't, I don't think that that's a useful thing to do for clients. And so she just, she had a moment where she got to decide like, well, is this a good fit for me? And what she decided was, well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. If they genuinely insist on that, then it isn't, because I'm not prepared to do it. But what she suspected was that actually they wouldn't really care about that much if she was a great teacher. And by great teacher, she was thinking, connected with the clients, brought the clients on a journey, lifted all boats, had everybody at the end of class going, oh, that was so much fun. That was amazing. Right. And so she just went in there and did her audition, didn't mention the word core once, just was her sparkly self. And at the end, they offered her the job. Right. And that, I think that is just a beautiful illustration of the idea that actually the studio owner, they specifically stipulated you must do this thing. And then Lizzie specifically didn't do that thing, and they go, great, you're the best candidate, you get the job. And that just shows that the studio owner didn't actually care about the thing that they thought was so important. It's just they didn't know what else to say, right? They were just defaulting to the whatever criteria that they knew. And what they actually wanted was someone who could wow those clients and have the clients going, oh, I'm going to come back next week and bring my husband, not somebody who mentions core 9 times in a class. Like, they didn't actually care about that.
I love that story. I didn't know. I think that when you told that story, you never mentioned her name, but I'm not surprised. Way to go, Lizzie. I love that story. Lizzie, you're the best.
Yeah. It's such a great story.
It's a good story. Well, and it encapsulates what we're talking about, right? Like being true to yourself, knowing what you're good at.
It's like if you went on a date with a potential, marriage partner, right? And you started asking them things like to decide whether it was a good fit. And you started with total trivia, like, do you squeeze a toothpaste from the top or the bottom? Pineapple on pizza, yes or no? And it's like, are those really important criteria to decide, your life partner? What about, like, do you want to have kids? What are your values? Do you want to travel? How important is family? That kind of stuff. That would be more important, surely. So I think it's the analogy, is I think works. Like, if we're talking about this trivia, like how do you queue X, Y, and Z? It's like, is that really what's important? I don't think so. Yeah. So, like you say, I think if you can get an audition and have the audition before you have the technique conversation, so I think the correct sequence is first do a bunch of classes at the studio. And at that point, you may go, you know what? I don't think this is going to be a good fit. I'm not going to apply for the job. Or you might go, this might really work. I'm going to apply for the job. Then you apply for the job. Do everything you can do to have an audition before you have that philosophy conversation, right? And then have the philosophy conversation after the audition. Now, if you have to have the philosophy conversation before the audition, I think this is kind of a life hack that it's not. Yeah, I would put it more in like a sleight of hand / life hack category. But basically, you can talk in generalities. So if we say, the more specific you get about something, the more likely it is you'll find some difference, right? So if I said, Natalie, do you like pineapple on pizza, yes or no? You might say no, right? And I might say, oh, we're different. We're in conflict there, right? But if I said, Natalie, do you like pizza, yes or no? I don't know. What would you say? Well, there you go. We're 100% in alignment, right? So we've zoomed out to a higher level where we're not talking about the specifics, right? So if I said to you, well, do you like wholemeal pizza made with gluten-free pastry with tomato but no cheese? And, it's like, if we get super specific, I'm sure we'll find areas that we'll disagree on, right? But the more we zoom out, the more likely it is that we agree. Okay, if I just say you said, no, I don't like pizza, I say, oh, do you like eating out? Do you like eating food cooked by other people? Do you like sharing important moments with people you love and care about where there's conversation and food? It's like we're going to get to some zoomed out level where you're going to go, yeah, I do like that. And I'm going to go, me too, right? We're of but one mind on this topic, right? So the Pilates analogy there might be like, okay, instead of, what is the best cue for transversus abdominis to exclude the activation of internal obliques, right? That's extremely specific. Okay, we might zoom out and go, do you think it's important to keep clients safe in class? Yes, I do. That's really important to me. See, we're in agreement, right? Do you like to give clients a balanced workout that leaves them feeling longer and taller and happier and serene? Yeah, that's totally the way I teach, right? We're 100% in alignment. So we can zoom out and out and out until we get to a sufficient level of generality where, of course, do you believe in loving people? It's like, yeah, I don't think, do you believe in being kind? Do you believe, we could zoom out so far that pretty much literally everyone on earth would agree, and so if you can zoom the conversation out, you'll have more chance of finding common ground.
Right. Well, and if we're talking about Pilates, we don't even have to talk about Pilates. We can talk about just how you love movement and how you really feel strongly that movement is essentially one of the most powerful gifts that we can give to ourselves and to other people and make it about that.
Yeah, 100%. So where do we land? Do sessions in the studio, make a decision based on that, whether you want to work there or not. If you think you might want to work there and you're willing to acknowledge that, okay, they might do some things differently to how you do them, and that's going to be cool. You know, like we don't have to all be identical carbon copies of each other. We can have differences. You know, you and I could happily share a meal that involved pizza, and I could have pineapple on mine and you could have no pineapple on yours, and that would be cool. You know, like, so, you know, that doesn't have to be a deal breaker. And so, but there might be some sort of more fundamental things, value-based things that might be a deal breaker for you, and you get to choose that, and you both have to swipe right. Otherwise it's no match. And so then, if you do get to go to an audition before you have a further conversation, you know, or when you apply, you know, the conversation that you should initiate, you know, rather than saying, here's my resume, here's my lineage, you should say, hey, I bet you've got this problem, right? And the problem is you need staff and you're doing taxes on your kitchen table at midnight after teaching 14 hours. You want to get back to your family, okay? And I'm here to solve that problem for you, because I'm going to take these classes and I'm going to be so easy to work with. I will never call in late. I will always be cheerful. I will wow your clients and they will love coming back, and the classes will be full, and I'm going to be so popular, but I'm just going to be so easy to work with no ego, right? I'm never going to have, you know, spats with my co-workers or whinge or roll my eyes when you ask me to do a Saturday shift or something. And, you know, you will be like speaking music into that person's ears. You know, they'll be hearing the heavenly choir when you're saying those words, and they'll be like, can this be true? Could this really happen to me? And they won't yet believe that it's true, but they'll be like intrigued. And so that way you get to go and have an audition and you get to just shine and be yourself. And my advice would be Lizzie, you know, just teach how you teach, and can focus on connection and, you know, teaching your best self to their best self, and focus on what's common. And then when you do have the conversation, you know, focus on what you share, what is the common humanity and the common passion for movement and Pilates and helping people that we all share. Otherwise we wouldn't be in this business. And don't get bogged down in the tiny minutiae of which muscles should be activated or blah, 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 you know. And if they ask you a direct question, okay, about those things, I guess I'm interested to hear your response, Natalie, but I guess I would just say, like, well, I didn't cue transversus in my class. You know, how did you feel about the class? You know, did you enjoy it? What would you say in that situation?
Yeah, I think I would say the same thing. And also if they ask, I think that invites the conversation about like how I would love to nerd out with you about this. Like how much time do you have? And have a back and forth. I think that's really important, to be able to have a genuine conversation with two curious people about, you know, why I do things the way that I do. And, you know, for those of you listening who are part of the Breathe community and part of the Pilates Elephants community, I think just one of the things that I feel like we can rest assured about is that we're working with evidence-based tools, and we're also part of a community that continues to support each other and to provide professional development for each other too. And I think those are huge benefits, to be a part of a community that is so invested in becoming better Pilates teachers. I think that is just, what kind of studio owner wouldn't want that, right? To have, to bring in somebody that's doing something differently, that can articulate why they're doing it differently, and that is part of a community, part of a network that continues to grow because we want to learn more about doing our job better. I just think it's a win-win.
Yeah, me too. I think we're done.
I think so.
I think we've solved all the world's problems.
Go out and fly your freak flag. And, you know, the other thing too is like, there's another path, right? One path is to be a part of a studio and be a part of a pre-existing community where you're different and you're going to have to learn how to navigate that difference and how to make compromises so that you can coexist. The other path is to just create your own thing, make your own studio, do your own business so that you can do exactly what you want to do. You don't have to answer to anybody. And that's completely fine too. So, if you go one way or the other, I'm going to just say, because I don't think I'll ever own my own Pilates studio or Pilates business, is I really, I've really come to value and appreciate my place in the Pilates community where I'm part of a pre-existing community so that I can continue to learn from people who are different than me, but also so that they can hear my side of the story too. And I feel like that's a really nice way to continue to change and grow the community. And I'm doing that in like my tiny, tiny, tiny bit of the Pilates universe, but I'm happy in that spot. So I think if you choose, screw it, it's too much of a bother, I can't be bothered, and do your own thing, then Raph has plenty of other materials for you opening up your own Pilates studio or studio business.
I think that's such a good point. And, if you're listening to this and you're thinking like, oh, well, there are, 3 Pilates studios in my area and they're all like totally incompatible with me working there. It's like, well, great. There's a massive gap in the market there for somebody who's different to those Pilates studios. And you could just open up, sessions out of your back room or some online sessions, or you could rent a space or whatever. But if there's nothing that's vaguely compatible with you in your local area, that's a business opportunity for sure.
There you go.
Good talk.
Good talk. Thanks, Raph.
See ya.